If people are joining us online on the live stream, we're starting a little bit early, but it's all being recorded, and so we will look forward to also sharing this with the community. And I just want to say thank you to Richard and Martha for doing this. And Richard, I turn it over to you.
Okay, I wanted to begin by placing this event in the context that we've had now for a number of years, although it's sort of in hiatus, I guess, recently, of what we call Torah of the Elders that Rabbi Sager had started. And we actually had a number of people honored that way. And usually, every time we try to honor people who are older community members who have lived interesting lives. And Martha qualifies for having an interesting life. I won't talk about the older.
Not one of the oldest.
No, I'm probably the oldest, but that's beside the point. No, that also, that she's an interesting person in her own light, but today we're mainly calling on her to help us observe the 95th anniversary yesterday of Elie Wiesel's birthday. And Martha worked with him as Rabbi Graber mentioned earlier, for 27 years, and has a lot to say about her time with him. And as you've also just mentioned, this is being streamed and recorded, and for information about how to get the recording, if you want to do that after the holiday, you can contact the synagogue office for information about that. I wanted to start out by asking Martha how you came to work with Elie Wiesel.
Well, in the summer of 1976, I read in the Boston Globe that Elie Wiesel was coming to teach at Boston University. I had been a religion major, philosophy of religion at Barnard, and a master's at Columbia in the same field. What do you do with that? I mean, there are very few things that you could go on to, I guess, get a PhD and teach in a religion department. But in 1976, there weren't so many Jewish studies departments or even religion departments. Anyway, I had read all of his books to date, and he was teaching a class in the fall, and I decided to take his class. I was looking for something to do. My sons were 9 and 11, and I did see a job listing that didn't mention his name, but it sounded like it was to be Elie Wiesel's secretary. Well, I was not a trained secretary, and it also asked for competence in French, and I hadn't done anything with French since college days. This is 1976 we're talking about, and so I went and took his first class. Well, the human resources people hired someone who knew no French, who had no idea who Elie Wiesel was. The guy was really over his head. And he quit in January. I was in the course from September to December. And I happened to go to a conference that Wiesel was giving at Harvard in January. And I went with my resume. And I talked to him, and he said, "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" And I had taken the class, so he knew me from the class. I said, "Well, I didn't think I was competent for the job." Anyway, to make a long story short, as of the spring of 1977, I became his personal assistant. And the job involved, I ran the office, basically. There was no one working for him in New York other than his lecture agent and his literary agent and his lecture, the person who arranged all of his lectures. I was it. So I ran the office, I did correspondence, I did recommendations, and he only came once a week from New York. He would fly up once a week, and I supervised his teaching fellows. And I stood in at faculty meetings because he wasn't there, because of what my training was, which was not secretarial, it was philosophy of religion. I was his stand-in at the faculty meetings, and they treated me like a colleague, really, basically. So that's how I came to it. I fell into it, basically. I came because I wanted to study with him, and I was looking for something to do, and there it was.
He obviously knew you a little bit from your class that you took with him.
Well, yeah, but it was a large class. Actually, no one controlled the class. That's the other thing I should say about my responsibilities. I think that's one of your questions, which we didn't get to, but in terms of responsibilities, no one controlled that first class. So there were 100 people in the class. It was not a lecture. I mean, it was a lecture class. After that, it was a seminar. And how many seminars are huge? I mean, the seminar should have been 40 tops. Sometimes it was 50, sometimes it was 60, because no one asked me to do this, but I took it upon myself to interview each student who wanted to take the class. So I gave myself the responsibility of making up his classes over 27 years. I guess I wanted it to be a great experience for them, a diverse group of students, as well as for him. He had been teaching at City University in New York, and here we were in Boston, so I let people cross-register from Tufts, from Harvard, from Brandeis. One student from Brown in Providence commuted an hour on the train for an 8:30 a.m. class with him. I think her friends thought she was crazy, but anyway, people came from diverse places, and I made up those classes.
Did you ever tell somebody you don't seem to fit?
Well, no, I didn't say you didn't seem to fit, but we made it an upper-level seminar, so it was mostly juniors and seniors, and if people had not taken any philosophy or religion, I suggested that they try to take a philosophy class before they came to take his class.
Well, the meat of what we want to talk about is what you would say were some of your most memorable moments working with him.
My most memorable moments.
Moments.
Well, I should say this is another part of the responsibilities. I'm sorry, this is very important. I had a work-study student and then eventually an assistant who was secretary, and I didn't want them to answer the phone because part of the fun of the office was you never knew who was at the other end or what language they were speaking. They could be speaking Yiddish, they could be speaking French, they could be speaking English, they could be speaking Hebrew. I know something of all of those languages, enough to take a message or really know what they were calling about, even the Yiddish and the Hebrew. And so I felt like I wanted to answer the phone. And it was lucky I did, because it was amazing. One day, Yves Montand called, and Yves Montand starts telling me I'm a friend of Elie's, and he starts telling, I said, I know who you are, you don't need to tell me who you but if it had been a 18-year-old student answering the phone, it wouldn't have been the same thing. Plus, one day, I take a call, and this person says, is Elie Wiesel giving a lecture tonight? I said, yes. And the guy says, Allah Akbar. Well, I knew what that meant. That's what a terrorist says before they go do a terror act. So I immediately called the BU police, but I hung up the phone, and I called the BU police, and thereafter we had security at all his lectures. They were going to cancel the lecture, but they didn't. They had a dog, a sniffing dog, and they called the FBI, and after that, there was security at all of his lectures.
Did anybody ever show up actually like that? They caught? You don't know, probably.
Probably not. Probably not. And also he flew. I forgot to say that it wasn't part of that question. He lived in New York, and he flew once a week from New York, so that he would teach one class on one afternoon, and then the next class the next morning. So he'd stay one night overnight, and that's how it functioned. Okay.
Well,
What was the question? I
that-
forgot.
that was-
I went off the question.
No, that's already a memorable
Oh, my
moment.
memorable,
Memorable
that was a negative memorable moment, right. There are many positive memorable moments. Many of the teachers who taught Wiesel's book Night were music teachers. Interesting. There was one music teacher in New Hampshire who would come down for his class, and she would bring her classes because she taught night in her class. There was an Irish Catholic music teacher in Dublin who started a festival called the Sephora Festival, which was a music festival in Dublin, named for Elie Wiesel's little sister who went up and smoked the first day at Auschwitz. And Berna kept calling, trying to get Wiesel to come to the conference. Well, he just could not get it on his schedule. So one day she said to me, well, why don't you come? So I did. That was a memorable moment. I represented him. I asked him to give me a copy of his memoir. At that time, he had written his memoir, and he inscribed it for her. I brought it, and I stayed in a castle in Dublin that had been changed into a hotel, and then I got taken around Ireland. It was a memorable moment. Another memorable moment was after a couple of years, Wiesel was asked by President Carter to chair a commission on the Holocaust, which later became the Holocaust Memorial Committee. And that's a story in itself. I'm not going to go into that. But the fun thing was that it's the first time he had a staff other than me, because I was the only, actually, he didn't really treat them as a staff. I was it. And so whenever there were things happening actually, I should say that I think Carter thought Wiesel was going to recommend a memorial statue of some sort, another statue for Washington, D.C. But Wiesel believed in memory. And because of that, he felt it needed to be a teaching institution. And it was his idea to create the Holocaust Museum, which has had millions of visitors to this day from all over the world, obviously mostly not Jewish people, because we're not that many in the world, and people just kept coming. Anyway, the first year there were they created days of remembrance, and I was invited to go to the first ceremony in the Capitol. Carter was presiding, and it was really amazing to see the liberating troops walk in with their flags. And it was just outstanding, and it was really one of my high points. And let's see, a more personal thing was his son Alicia's bar mitzvah, where I saw him as the father of this bar mitzvah boy. And it was just such a privilege to be there and to see him dancing in a circle with the men from the old country. It was a very, very special privilege. And my first trip to Israel, I had not been to Israel before I started working for Elie Wiesel. I started working for him in 1977, and in 1978, I went on my first trip. And he had introduced me to friends of his in Israel, friends in high places, the editor and publisher of Yediot Ahronot, which is major daily, and they became close friends of mine. And in terms of a high point, so whenever I went to Israel, I had this group of Elie's close friends who treated me like family because they loved him. And so that was a high point of this position, is that I was treated like I was part of his family.
How often did you get to?
Many times. Actually, before COVID, I would go every year or two. And one year, the son of the publisher of Yediot Ahronot, who now, since his father died, is the publisher, Nani Moses, stayed in my house for a year because he came to do a master's at Boston University, and Elie suggested that I had a cottage on my property, and he lived in the cottage for a year. So I got to know them, and then there were other family members in that family who became very close friends. And another high point, besides the attachment to Wiesel, was because of the position. I have so many friends in places all over the world. The Swiss journalist who used to call on the phone, and when I told him I was coming to Switzerland on my way to Italy, he said, well, you have to come and my wife and I will take you around. You know, these kind of connections that happened because of being in that position. And that was really fantastic. But the warm welcome of his friends in Israel stays with me, obviously, till this day.
The next generation.
The next generation, right, right.
That's very nice. I'm thinking when you were mentioning just being in a class and at the beginning of the whole connection.
Well, and the other thing is that one of my special privileges was in the 27 years, I sat in on every single class he taught. And he never taught the same course more than once. He wanted to learn from his teaching fellows. So the teaching fellows varied. And, one was interested in suicide. And so he taught a class on suicide and literature. He taught classes in subjects that were interesting to his teaching fellows. And I could sit in on every class. So when I had to draft a recommendation, when these students were going on for graduate work, I was drafting recommendations. I knew the students very well because I was sitting in on all the classes, and they ran as seminars, sometimes as many as 60 in the seminar around the table. And it was just a special privilege. It was just really a special privilege to get to know the students, to get to read the readings in the classes. So
he broadened out from just the Holocaust, obviously.
I actually,
Yes.
you told me to bring some paperwork, so I did, so I could tell you some of the classes that he taught. I don't want to forget this. Now I find something that's reminded me, another special event that I went to was he was invited to be a speaker at the tercentenary of the Salem witch trials. Is that surprising? Well, they were establishing a human rights award that day, and he wasn't getting the award. Someone else was, but they felt that he was the person who was meant to speak at this award. So that was an interesting occurrence. He taught here somewhere courses on special moment. I'm sorry, I'm going back. The day he won the Nobel Prize, the day it was announced, I was awakened at home at 6 o'clock in the morning by the Boston University PR to let me know that today was going to be a special day in my office. Boy, the phone was ringing off the hook. I didn't even speak to him till 11 o'clock that morning because I'm assuming his phone was ringing off the hook in New York. And so that was kind of amazing. And when he came back to the university after that announcement, the campus was crawling with journalists from all over the world, and he did not let them come into his class. He was very protective of his students. He did not want them coming in and, changing his day in class.
Did he give a post-class press conference of any sort?
We gave lots of press conferences,
Well,
yeah. So,
the day
but it
after
didn't
he
involve,
got
he
this award.
he tried not to involve his students at all. I don't know what I was looking for. Sorry, I thought I was more organized here.
You're an organized person, otherwise he wouldn't have kept you for 27 years.
Well, I guess so, yeah. Well, let's put it this way. The first class was the Holocaust. It's the only time he taught the Holocaust, the class that I took with him at the beginning. it just was a tremendous burden for him, and he left it to younger scholars to do that class. It took an awful lot out of him. So that was the only time he taught the Holocaust. He taught classes from Greek literature to Shakespeare to all sorts of literary subjects. And I just had a listing of it. I purposely did that.
But most of the students not Jewish, you took his class?
Well, no, well, that's a good question. It was a mix. I tried very hard to bend over backwards. Like, we were located, the building that we were in was the School of Theology, which was training ministers. And I felt that it would be very important for those people or other non-Jewish people to take classes with him so that they would, particularly the people who became pulpit ministers, and they did. They used to quote him in sermons. And some people, well, actually, a good example of somebody who came to study with him is somebody who had been corresponding with him, Reinhold Boschke from Germany, who had been writing to him and one day showed up in the office in the summer, said, "I'm here to study with the master," which is what European students do. And I said, "Reinhold, why didn't you tell me you were coming? The class was, you have pre-registration at Boston University." So the class was full, closed, but I looked at this guy, blonde, blue-eyed, passionate. So you put another chair in the seminar, or you sit on the windowsill. It was like that. The classes were packed. And I thought it was important for the class to be mixed. It was not a Jewish class. So.
Yeah, I mean, the topics were not just Jewish.
They were not. They were definitely not. But he always did teach classes on Hasidism, Hasidic masters, and he taught classes on Talmud. But remember, there was no requirement of Hebrew in the class, so he couldn't really do it the way he might have done it if it were an all Jew. If he were teaching at Jewish Theological Seminary, it would have been different. But this was Boston University, and it was a liberal arts class, basically.
But he was based in New York.
He lived in New York, but he was based in New York, but his academic base was Boston University. Anyway, Reinhold had been studying in Germany, in Stuttgart, Bonn, I'm not sure. He was studying at a university in Germany and changed what he was studying, and now he has made a life project of translating all of Wiesel's books into German. Wiesel wrote, most people don't know, more than 60 books. People know Night, and maybe they know another one or two, but he wrote more than 60 books, novels. He wrote a play, cantata, and nonfiction. Obviously, he wrote on Hasidic masters. And so Reinhold became his devoted student, and in 1995, he was going to do a conference for German school teachers mainly, for them to learn something about Elie Wiesel's work. And he said, "You have to come, and you have to do a paper." And I said, "Reinhold, I haven't done a paper since the 60s. Are you kidding me?" He said, "You'll do it." So I did. And the fun thing for me, I went, and the fun thing for me was to meet all the people who had been Wiesel scholars, who had written books and papers, whom I knew from correspondence or telephone calls. So it was really a very exciting, that was a high point to do that.
And you retired and, 2004, and moved down here pretty soon after that.
Pretty soon after that, I thought he'd retire before I did, but he did not believe in retirement, number one. He became ill, and I think that he stopped. It was a hard thing to do. He was flying every week And he taught one course in the fall and one in the spring. And there were some winters in Boston that were so bad that he couldn't get in or out. And in fact, once I drove him all the way home from Boston to New York because the flight was canceled. That was a privilege, to have conversation for 4 hours in the car. So he made an arrangement with the president of the university to teach both of the classes in the fall semester before the snows came. And so that's how that.
Did you keep in touch with him much?
I did keep in touch with him some, but not a lot. I mean, I was here and he was there and traveling all over the world. I mean,
Still active?
I'm reminding myself, traveling all over the world. There was one week, he was so devoted to his students that he always opened the class and often started with a student doing a presentation on the reading of the day, and then they would have a discussion. And one week he got a phone call after the class from the president of France, Mitterrand, who was a personal friend, and inviting him for breakfast in Paris the next Monday when the class was supposed to happen. And he just felt awful that he hadn't told the class, and he always opened the class. So he said to me, you just arrange for a hookup from Paris to the classroom, which I did. I mean, how many faculty would even think to do that, would care to do that? But he felt it was his obligation to open the class. And then he, of course, had someone stand in to teach the class, but he was there to open the class. So that was really unusual. Let's see. Oh, I have to go back. I'm sorry.
That's
I
fine.
write
At some point,
things
we're
down
gonna
and I don't
open
go right into the
open floor
question.
for questions too,
In
but go
terms
ahead.
of special things, I just want to say that he had a 60th birthday while I was working for him, and seems so young now. He would have been 95 yesterday. On his 60th birthday, I decided that the thing that would please him, he really didn't celebrate birthdays, but I had students, all the students of the years that he had already taught, send in letters saying, what they got out of his classes and what catch up on their lives. And I bound them in a leather book and gave that to him. The 70th birthday, there was a very distinguished conference of distinguished speakers. And I thought, we have to do something more personal. So for the 70th birthday, I invited some of his favorite students and favorite people to come to the office, small group, to have a little birthday party, just a little party with a cake and whatever. And one of the students is a cantor. She was one of the first female cantors. Debbie Kachko. And she came with her traveling guitar. And when he walked into, we all gathered before he got into the office. And when he walked in, we all sang Yom Holedet HaSameach. And then he went into his inner office and we were out there. He came out and started leading us in song. And she made a recording of it, which she then distributed to all of us who had been there, which I wish I could play. But if anyone is interested, I have a recording of him leading us in song. And it was just really very, very special. Nobody who had been there ever has forgotten that was his 70th birthday. It was really wonderful. There aren't recordings of his classes, but there are recordings of one of the things, I'm glad you asked that. Besides teaching his classes, he did a series every year of 3 encounters for the community as well as the classes, the university community and the public. People would drive 2 hours from Connecticut to sit in on his lectures, and those are all recorded. And there is an archive at the 92nd Street Y, at Elie Wiesel archive, which you can find all kinds of things there. You just go to the 92nd Street Y, you'll find the site. Just ask for Elie Wiesel archive, which is.
Are there other questions? I'll repeat them, by the way.
Oh, that's easy.
Why did he show up at Boston University?
Well, John Silber, who was the president who was loved and hated, knew the value of Elie Wiesel. He knew what this man represented altogether, and he went after him. He really gave him an incredible position, and he just had to teach 2 classes and 3 lectures in a year to the public. And I think Wiesel thought he might move to Boston, but he had one son who was in school in New York, in a Jewish school in New York, and I think he felt that it was best to stay in New York. Plus, he was traveling all over the world, and it was easy to get in and out of New York, easier to get to places. I remember actually, that was another special moment for me. When I went to Japan, there was somebody in Japan who was a big fan of his, a woman who sent gifts to me. I mean, it was just really amazing. And Japanese are very generous. And so he went to Japan, and in Hiroshima made it, actually when he came back, I think he made the statement that world leaders should get together there and realize where it comes to if you can't be peaceful with one another. We really miss him today.
Second question.
He, yes, the question is, what else did he do? A lot of things, including what you mentioned. He was a co-founder with Leonard Fine of Moment magazine, and just really, some of you may have heard him. He spoke on human rights all over the place. Oh, and after he won the Nobel Prize, he took the Nobel Prize money and started the Elie Wiesel Foundation for Humanity, and they sponsored conferences in lots of places, including Paris was the first one. He did it at the Élysée Palace with Mitterrand. And by the way, when I talked about languages coming in over the phone, that was one of the things that I could say was very irritating, because when the French would call me, they expected me to speak French. And I knew the people in the palace spoke English better than my French, but I managed, limped along. But they started conferences on all the subjects that you would imagine, that, you know.
Okay.
These teachers, well, first of all, he was music. I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Why music, did you have? Yeah. Why were teachers of music involved or attracted to them?
You know, I never asked them that question, frankly. They just decided well, the one in Ireland she was devoting a music festival to his sister. So it connected to music, and she had young people. This music festival was youngsters, and she wanted them to know something about night. And the one in New Hampshire, she just became a fan of his. I mean, I tell you, the thing that I didn't mention before, one of the high points, besides my attachment to him, because of my attachment to him, I have become lifetime friends with many of his students. And to this day, I mean, the one in Paris, one in lots in Israel, and it's just amazing, the people that I, still care. I still get letters from students and thanking me. They called me the gatekeeper, because I did turn some students away. And the ones that I let in really we're very grateful. But as far as teachers, anyway, it was mostly the children's letters came from teachers, classes where teachers were teaching reading to a lot of kids who didn't read. And when they started reading Night, they could not put it down. Night is only something like 128 pages. And it's very clear, and they just identified with this adolescent in this horrible situation. But music teachers, I guess the teacher herself was so moved by the book that they felt an obligation for their students to read it and to get to know him.
Other question?
1976, the fall of 76 was his first class, and he taught, well, I retired in 04, he was still teaching, and I think he actually died on July 1st, 2016. He didn't really retire, he just stopped coming. He didn't call it retirement. And he was, head of the foundation in New York, although his wife really did a lot of the stuff there, and now their son is the head of the Elie Wiesel Foundation for Humanity. Liberal arts, like the college. Yeah. Well, what's your brother's name? Huh? Oh.
And why didn't you let him in?
He had a lost opportunity. Sorry about that.
You might have kept him out.
I don't know. Yes.
Did you have any in the course writing the many books that you wrote?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question because that was on my list. Twice in particular, well, more than twice, but twice in particular I wanted to talk about. One was he took it upon himself, and many of you have probably seen it, to write a Haggadah. I don't know if you saw the Haggadah he did, which was really an incredible project because it had Hebrew, it had Yiddish commentary, it had English, and his commentary was Holocaust kind of commentary in that Haggadah. And he got Mark Podwall, an artist who worked with him on other things, to do illustrations for that Haggadah. And I don't think anyone could have really done as good a job as I did, because it was a very special kind of typing job, depending upon the language that you were inserting there. It was just very different. And that was a very special project. The other time was he wrote a book called, well, I wrote that down. Where did I write it? Oh, yes. The Testament. I don't know how many of you have read the Testament. And that was 1981, and he inscribed it for Martha, who worked days and nights for Paltiel Kosovo, who was the main character. Well, we didn't have computers in the beginning when I started this job. I was typing and retyping things, and he typed things. And so I spent a summer weekend with him in his summer house, typing and retyping, and that's what he meant by I worked days and nights for this character, because the book had to be submitted to his publisher. So yes, I enjoyed working on the books, yeah. That's a tough one because that was the fun thing, just sort of hearing him. He could be in a phone call on Yiddish, he could be in a phone call in French, English. I would say much of his, I was going to say French, but it depends who was calling. In terms of his comfort level, I think French became his literary language, but it also became a spoken language. After the camps, he got off in Paris. De Gaulle offered sanctuary to the kids who survived. And he lived in Paris and he attended the Sorbonne. I don't think he got a degree, which means Harvard would probably never hire him. I think you have to have a PhD to teach at Harvard, by the way, why he worked at Boston University. Right. But no, I would say French, well, comfortable in English, French, English, Yiddish.
Did he write his books mainly in English first or French first?
Oh, that's a good question. All of his books were written in French first. They're all translated.
That's it.
So that was a special privilege to be in that place because every holiday in December, I knew there was a new Elie Wiesel book coming, so I could give these books to people and have him inscribe them. Yes, Judy? Oh, I'm sorry. He was religious. He was kosher, definitely, although he did eat in restaurants. I mean, he traveled around the world, but he was almost vegetarian, I would say, if he ate in restaurants. And he went regularly to synagogue. Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think, I can't hear you.
Did he have difficulty weaving that into his academic life?
I don't think he had difficulty. No, I don't think so. And I have to say that I think he brought me closer to my religion. My parents were conservative Jews. I was raised conservative and very comfortable here. Great Freilach here. But Rabbi, you had a question. Don't know him.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know that
The
name.
answer is
Well, David Weiss I know, was a very, very close friend. I mean, the closest, I would say. But I didn't know the other one that you mentioned. Yeah. But he also, when he was chairman of the Holocaust Council, he became very close to other people that he brought in to work on the museum and so forth, who were survivors, not from his childhood, but survivors from camps, not necessarily Auschwitz, where he was, or Buchenwald. But there was a very tight group of survivor friends.
Other question? I think this has been very enlightening. We're very proud that we have you in our congregation. You can tell us these things. Thank you.
I wanted to finish with a couple of things. Some of you who know me know that things like flowers are very important to me. So I wanted his office to feel, to just have a certain atmosphere. So when he came in on a Monday morning at 8:30 in the morning, I was already there. And I had on his desk a bouquet of flowers, and I had a cake that I might have baked. I had a bowl of fruit. He never took a lunch hour, and he was there one full day. And I just felt like taking care of him. It was just, that's who I was. And I was a graduate of Barnet in a time of women's lib, and it wasn't part of the job description, shall we say, and it wasn't the kind of thing that most women were doing, but I felt it was very important, and I felt like I set an atmosphere, and we were really a good professional couple. And I would like to read just one thing that I wrote, sort of ending on a sad note, but I think I need to do this. When he passed away, I wrote a poem for actually all the students that I knew in the classes and professors. And it's for Elie. Out of the cauldron of the death camps, he survived to tell the cruel tale, a tale filled with pain and suffering, with starvation and loss. Yet in his life, he was so much more than that teller of dark tales. His days were lived with great purpose, no time ever wasted, not for him. For the survivor, every day is a gift, and he surely lived each day to the fullest. A myriad of accomplishments were his, the greatest of the world's honors bestowed upon him. Wherever people suffered on earth, he tried to be there as support, making their cause known. He was our moral guide. As teacher, as leader, he led the way. We who knew him and loved him were privileged to share joy and song and laughter. He may have walked with kings and princes. He was larger than life. But wherever he was in the world, we knew that his heart was always with us in the classroom. The pain for all of us, his students, his followers, the pain of his now stilled voice feels too much to bear. Hard to believe, unreal is what it is, that we are on this earth that continues to spin, and he is no longer present. How can that be? We weep and weep, for our hearts are broken. The Master is gone. May we continue his great work, and may he rest in peace.
Thank you.
Yes, Lou? You never told me the story. What?
That's
Thank you, Lou.
another reason for celebrating that she's here now.
And I have to say, as an aside, because of the Jewish calendar being what it is, Elies' birthday is not Sukkot weekend. It was Simchas Torah. Interesting, because of the Jewish calendar. So yesterday was his English birthday, but it's Simchas Torah. So we can think about him all week now.